Next here on the show, we are going to be talking about a story that has been brewing for years, and that is the fate of the Waspi women, those pensioners born after April 1950, and they have won, finally, at the Parliamentary Health, or the Parliamentary Ombudsman, who has said that they all deserve compensation. And I'm joined now by the chair of the Waspi campaign 2018, Hilary Simpson. Hilary, thank you so much for joining us here on talkTV. Let's get it out there for a start. I mean, this is an extraordinary report, and huge sort of respect and appreciation for your role in this very difficult and long-running campaign, which has had several court cases and all sorts of things. You have won. This is unequivocal evidence that the decision made in 1995 was not communicated to women. They had no way of knowing about it. You have won, and the government should get on and pay this compensation immediately. Do you think that's going to happen?
I'd like to think it was going to happen. The government's record on compensation in terms of swiftness of payment is not great. I think the fight continues, actually, to make sure that compensation is paid quickly, that it's fair, that it's paid in an uncomplicated way, so that this can be resolved once and for all.
And of course, when you say quickly, fair, and in an uncomplicated way, the government knows exactly who is affected by this. They have all of your details. Do you think you're right? We recently had a vote in Parliament about the disgusting delay in paying people for the contaminated blood scandal, one of the worst scandals to hit the UK. We've learned about the appalling behaviour by the Post Office in that extraordinary programme, Mr Bates versus the Post Office, over the scandal that hit sub-postmasters and postmistresses all over the UK. I agree with you. This cannot now become another story about how governments, all political parties, are seeking to avoid this and delay the repayment of this money. We know how much it should be. They have all your bank details. That money must come straight away, surely.
I agree with you. I mean, that's what we all want. That's what we've been fighting for. And crucially, a Waspi woman dies every 13 minutes. So the longer this drags on, the more people won't actually get that compensation.
And Hilary,
of course, some of us have a sneaking suspicion that that has been the plot all along. Leave it long enough and the numbers will go down.
And Hilary, having been on this extraordinary journey as with this campaign, how has this affected women and their retirement?
Well, there are 3.5 million of us, and I think, there are 3.5 million different stories, because you can't generalize in a way about the way it has affected people, but there are some themes that come through. It hasn't just affected people financially. I think it's affected people sort of psychologically. There's been a lot in the media recently about how it feels to be scammed. That kind of feeling that you get of, well, was I stupid to fall for this? And I think something very similar has been experienced by women who think, well, why didn't I know? And one of the good things about the Ombudsman's report is that it has actually vindicated those of us who genuinely didn't know. And, we weren't just being stupid, we really were not informed. So there's that aspect of it, there's a psychological aspect. It also impacts beyond the women themselves, to their families, to people who'd made commitments for taking on additional caring responsibilities for relatives or grandchildren on the assumption that they would be retiring at 60. And I think the retirement at 60 for women and at 65 for men was so kind of embedded in the national consciousness that if you were going to change that, you really did have to have an enormous PR effort to make sure that you got through to people. And that, that is what just didn't happen.
Yeah, Hilary, and you're right. And that has
No,
been the
but technical
debate.
change.
That has
Yeah.
been the debate all along, because the government has
Yeah.
said, repeated governments, in fact, it was a Conservative government, then a Labour government, then then a coalition government. So everyone has had their part to play in
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Let me ask you just one more thing, which I just think is extraordinary. I've been in Parliament for 14 years now. I have never, ever been able to recall an ombudsman laying a report in Parliament because it thinks a government department will ignore it. I mean, it's for people who don't follow politics, they won't understand how extraordinary this is. I mean, this has just never, ever happened in my entire period in Parliament. Why do you think the Ombudsman felt that they had to take that extraordinary step of calling upon ordinary backbench MPs like me to intervene? Do you think the department would have ignored this report?
Well, the Ombudsman must have had their reasons, and all along the DWP has been extremely reluctant to admit that they did anything wrong. So in a way, I'm not surprised. It is extremely rare, as you say, and I don't quite know where that leaves the Ombudsman concept if a government department can just turn around and say, well, actually, we don't accept your findings, because the Ombudsman is the final arbiter in this particular area of maladministration. So, you know, it is unprecedented. And I think, to be fair, that Parliament could have seen this coming. I think it was always going to be referred back to Parliament in some way or another. But this particular method of just saying, sorry, they're not going to comply, so it's over to you, I agree, totally unprecedented as far as I'm aware. And I think in this case, the compensation is due directly from a government department. It's not a kind of arm's length body. The people who work for the Department for Work and Pensions and who worked for that department in the past, they're government employees, pure and simple.
Hilary,
And so
let me ask
there's
you
even
this.
more onus, isn't there, for the government to do
Look,
something about it.
the government has to act. This is not a nice to have. This is a report, a finding of fact has been made. The government has to act, and I want to see, if my role as a member of Parliament, see it happen quickly. Let me ask you this finally. If Rishi Sunak was watching this interview now, and I hope that he may get the opportunity to catch up with it later, what's the one message as a Waspi woman and someone who's been a leader of the campaign that you would like to deliver to our Prime Minister?
Do the right thing by your mum, Rishi, actually. It's an ethical matter of justice. Justice has costs attached to it, and we know there will be costs attached to it, but these are the costs of justice. And you know what the right thing is, so let's just get on and do it.
Hilary, thank you so much for joining us. You heard it here. Come on, Prime Minister, and all politicians, because it's been laid before Parliament, it's all political parties. Let's get on and do it.